Recently, I had somebody ask me, is it possible for somebody to be a narcissist in one relationship and yet not be a narcissist at all in another? My first instinct, my first reaction was to say, no, it's impossible. Once a narcissist, always a narcissist. But when I really began thinking about it, my answer changed. And if you're curious to know if the person you're in a relationship with could possibly change, you're going to want to watch to the end of this video, because I'm going to give you 3 tips to help you to evaluate if this situation could be true in your case. The first thing that we have to remember is that narcissism is a scale. It's on a scale. Some people are high up on the scale. The higher up on the scale you are, the more malignant you are. In other words, the more manipulative, the more abusive you are. And the lower on the scale, you could have narcissistic traits, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are malignant, okay? So that's something that you have to understand. But I'm actually talking about somebody that might be considered high on the list of narcissism in this case. I don't want to give anyone false hope, because there's nothing worse than hoping somebody will change when they never will. There's nothing worse than that, right? But at the same time, when I really thought about this question, I thought of a couple of scenarios that I want to share with you. So in the scenario that I'm going to share today, it has to do with somebody that was maybe raised by narcissistic parents, right? And they know nothing about narcissism. They know nothing about emotional manipulation. They know nothing about malignant narcissism, but they were raised in that environment. So obviously they don't know what's going on, and they wind up in relationships. So they either wind up in a relationship with a narcissist, right? Because that's their normal. They gravitate toward that, and that happens a lot. At the same time, sometimes they wind up in a relationship with someone healthy. So when they're in that relationship that's healthy, at one point or another, something happens that opens the door to their conditioning, right? To what they were brought up, to how they were brought up to be in relationships. And they wind up becoming the narcissist. Not because they have NPD, not even because they are malignant narcissists, but because they don't know anything different. Now, I know some of you have already dropped down to the comment section, is probably blasting that section like it's impossible. And I understand that. I understand that it's hard to see this particular aspect of narcissistic abuse, but it happens. What happens is the child that grew up in those dynamics that is now in a romantic relationship, if it's with a healthy individual, suddenly they're, for the first time in their life, in a relationship with somebody that's not toxic. And that is completely foreign to them. It makes no sense. It feels weird. It feels uncomfortable. So since the other person is not toxic, is not narcissistic, the child that was raised in those dynamics takes on that role, steps up to the plate, so to speak, and becomes the narcissist. In my face-to-face coaching, I've spoken with many people that went through that predicament where they found themselves in this healthy relationship and didn't know how to work a healthy relationship. They didn't know what to do. So they did what was familiar. They created the dynamics. They created the abuse cycle in their current relationship. The amazing to horror. It's amazing. It's awful. They created that along with all of the manipulation that they learned in childhood. It comes out because that's what they know. However, if this person wakes up and realizes what's going on and gets help, then yes, they can heal the wounds from their childhood. They can get rid of their narcissistic fleas, and they can go on to have healthy relationships. It normally doesn't happen unless they have their heart broken and absolutely destroyed by someone that they really cared about. And because all of these dynamics came up in that relationship, they wound up losing that person. So by hitting rock bottom, it causes them to do their own inner healing journey, right? So that does happen. I've seen it happen. I know people that it's happened to. However, because this is true does not mean that every narcissist, everyone displaying narcissistic qualities or characteristics has the potential to be this person that's able to change. We have to be careful. There's nothing that a narcissist would love more, a malignant narcissist, one that will not change because they don't want to change because after all they're perfect. There's nothing that they would like more than for you to believe that they can change. Okay, so we have to be really careful with this information because I don't want to give false hope. Okay, but I do want to recognize the truth and the reality of this particular dynamic. So the real question is, how can we tell? How can we tell if we're creating false hope? How can we tell if this person really can change? And I'm going to give you three things to look for so that you can evaluate and determine if the person you're in a relationship with, if they can change. The first tip is obvious, right? The person has to have empathy. Anyone that has empathy, real empathy, not false empathy, not mirrored empathy, but real empathy, okay? Which means that they don't only feel sad or hurt because of the consequences that they're suffering. Because oftentimes a narcissist or a toxic person can look as if they have empathy because they'll cry sometimes, or at least they'll squeeze out a tear. They'll seem really sad and upset, but if you really look at what's making them sad or upset, oftentimes it's the fact that they have to face consequences that they don't like. Real empathy comes from caring about the other person and seeing their pain and caring about it. Okay, so you want to really evaluate, how is this person on the empathy scale? And not empathy towards others, because remember, we want them to have empathy towards others, but we don't want to just base it on that because narcissists are excellent actors and actresses. So what we really want to look for is the empathy they have with their loved ones, with their family members. So that's the first thing you want to look for. The second thing to look for is their ability to self-reflect. People that can self-reflect are able to apologize. And in their apology, we have to be careful because a narcissist is capable of saying the words, "I'm sorry," but it's one thing to say it and it's another thing to take responsibility for your actions, right? So oftentimes a false apology will sound like they'll be apologizing while excusing themselves at the same time because of something that you did, or because of something from their past, or in other words, they're making excuses in the middle of their apology. Somebody that can self-reflect has the ability to look at themselves and say, I messed up, I screwed up, I don't know what's wrong with me, I need help, I want to get better. And they're not focusing on you getting better, they're really able to focus on themselves. Okay, that's one thing to look for, but it needs to be combined with the next tip that I'm going to give you. That alone isn't enough. The next tip has to do with how they act or respond to therapy. It's not if they go to therapy, because guess what? There are narcissists or toxic individuals that will go to therapy, but their motives when they're in therapy are different from somebody that is not a narcissist. So somebody that goes to therapy that is a malignant narcissist will want to prove to the therapist that they're correct, that their perspective is correct, and that you are the problem. Anytime the therapist focuses on helping the narcissist or toxic person self-reflect, they'll get upset, they'll get angry, or they will want a different therapist. Okay, that's how narcissists go to therapy. They don't go to therapy to find out what they need to do, how they can be better. Okay, and it always has to be combined with you. They don't want to go alone. They don't want to go to therapy by themselves most of the time. Somebody that is not a narcissist will go to therapy. Well, first of all, they will want to go to therapy, especially if they see that the relationship is at the brink of being lost, right? And they really care about this person. They'll be willing to go to therapy to fix whatever is broken. And they will be focused on themselves. They're not going to be focused on the other person. They're not going to be focused on trying to point the finger. They're really going to want to fix themselves, right? And the last tip, which actually just came into my mind just now, is the fact that time will tell. So they have empathy. They are able to self-reflect. They're willing to get help, and they're focusing on themselves. So their motive for getting the therapy is really about personal growth, about becoming a better person and healing whatever has triggered these behaviors in them. And then the last thing that you want to look for is consistency. Not the abuse cycle, not the, okay, they changed, now we're back together and now it's awful. And just when it's so bad you want to leave, now they want to try again, you fall for it and it's awful. That's an abuse cycle. That's not consistency. So that might mean that in order to see if this is real, it might mean that there might be a separation or taking a step back to allow this person to grow. Not only to allow that person to grow, but to do your own growth as well and make sure there's nothing that you're doing that might enable that person's behavior. So that time is going to reveal a lot as well. Okay, and don't be impatient, because a narcissist, a malignant narcissist, can wait you out. They can wait and they can show you, they can fool you, but they always have a moment where they stop the act. And usually that moment is when you begin trusting them again. The moment you begin trusting them again, that's when the switch occurs with a real narcissist. So at the moments when you begin trusting this person again and letting your walls down, that's the moment you need to be extremely aware of how they're responding. So again, I don't want to provide false hope for anybody, but I do want to recognize that there are people that acted like narcissists in one relationship, but they are not narcissists in every relationship, because they wake up.